proposed area. And then you can see there's several standards that were adopted, and I'll go through some of those. Those are the bulleted items on number 3, page 3. Basically says the portion of the property to be developed should not be located within a floodplain or naturally sensitive area. The next one says measures must be taken to ensure that distilled spirit storage in an unincorporated area of Boyle County is undertaken in a manner which minimizes increased traffic congestion on existing streets, roads, and intersections. All developments shall be located on at least a collector road, street with at least 18 foot of pavement and improved shoulders of at least 3 foot in width. So that was a standard put in about what roads, if we were going to do this all over the county potentially, the roads had to be of a certain style, at least size, to be eligible to have such a style of development in the ag zone. The next one is pretty wordy, but I'll just summarize that bullet. We put a fire protection requirement in. It's not something that really gets addressed at this point in the process, and it says that in the sentence. If this is successful, a zoning permit has to be obtained. Potentially a site plan has to be negotiated or submitted through the Planning Commission. And at that time, a fire protection issues with hydrants or fire flow, sprinklers, or whatever combination is going to be required will probably have to be discussed in more detail. So at this point in the process, there is a fire protection standard, which basically says if we're in Danville service area, you're going to need 600 gallons a minute or 20 PSI, I guess, to serve hydrants or have water. There's an in lieu of option where you can do sprinklers or misters or even do a dry hydrant with a pond. But that, again, that's, at this point, we don't have hard detail on the option that this applicant's going to do. There'll have to be a fire protection standard achieved or discussed before they can get their permits to move forward. They might be able to describe what their plan is, but that was put in here again to make sure if we're moving forward, we've got fire protection or at least fire flow on the site for hydrants at a minimum. And that's a long bullet there at the bottom, page 3. Page 4 says the maximum size shall not exceed a footprint of 40,000 square feet and shall not exceed 60 feet in height. The next bullet says there's a 200-foot setback from all property lines, a 500-foot setback from any residential use or district, and a 1,000-foot setback if there's any church, synagogue, place of worship, daycare, school, park, etc. So again, there were setback requirements put into this standard. The next bullet, 50% of the property still has to stay in agricultural use. That's part of the trade-off of staying zoned ag. We still have to have some agricultural use under the state definition occurring on the property. And then the last one deals with outdoor storage, basically saying you only can do what the underlying zoning allows. Won't get into the rest of page 4. Those are some definitions in the zoning ordinance. Page 5 gets right to the heart of this exhibit right here. I'm probably going the wrong way. So this exhibit was submitted that shows basically a general conceptual layout of the property showing 11 future rick houses, driveways, some pipelines on the property, some floodplain on the property. And again, I would call this conceptual in nature because there were specific conditions submitted that were signed that I think are going to set the scale of the document, but they work together in a sense. This is the second exhibit here. It's a little harder to see on the screen, but you all have it. Show that 200-foot setback, how they're achieving that from the property lines. Vantage Engineering did these exhibits, and they're pretty spot on to convey issues. And there's the 500-foot. So there's the 500-foot setback to show if they're adjacent to any residential zones or residential property. There's no residential zones really, but there are some residential structures, and this shows that 500-foot buffer in the relationship to what's in the neighborhood. And they have to meet that setback or vary that setback, and there's been no variance request. So as we develop this site, they'll have to meet those 200-foot, 500-foot, and 1,000-foot setback if they apply. So with that, I'm going to go back, put this original exhibit up, and go to their conditions that were submitted on page 5. So for the newer members on the board, and I know we got last couple months, a conditional use permit is exactly as it sounds. It means we're giving a conditional approval to a property as opposed to rezoning it. And the applicant is supposed to put forward conditions to, again, written statements on the scale or some description on what we're going to do. At the same time, the zoning ordinance allows the Board of Adjustments to ask for other conditions if you see fit. Neighbors could get up and say, we'd like to see something, for example, and it could be worded as a condition right here during the hearing. But the applicant has put forward 9 conditions, I guess to say as a starting point for this hearing, that will hopefully set the scale of what they intend to do on the property. And I'll read those, and those, again, are referenced, the legal reference is Article 3, Section 387, that just describes what we just talked about, but here's the 9 conditions. The first one says, the applicant agrees to provide no more than 50% total lot coverage to the property, again, to meet that 50% directive that's already in the standards. No new building structure shall be installed within 200 feet of the open space perimeter buffer as shown in Exhibit 2. So with that condition, they've sort of brought this exhibit in as an attachment to that, and that's what they're referencing, that 200-foot setback. Spill containment basins will be installed downstream of all rick houses in accordance with state and local requirements. Somewhat generic in nature, just kind of kicking it to the state rules, whatever they are, they're saying they're going to be bound by those. And we don't get any more specifics than other than whatever the state rules are. 4 tries to set the scale of the property. It says applicant agrees that total building footprint shall not exceed 440,000 square foot. No building property shall exceed 7 stories in height. We worked with the applicant on this one a little bit. Again, there's 11 rick houses there shown, and the zoning ordinance says they can be a maximum of 40,000 square feet. We might have to tweak this or put a note on this where we end up today, because those actually are labeled as 20,000 square foot buildings. But I think what the applicant intends is to maybe do potentially the larger buildings in the same location, and the cap would be 440, meaning we'll do 11 rick houses at the 40,000 square foot footprint. But that exhibit, when it came in, was labeled as the 20s, but their desire is to leave it open to do the larger buildings or the smaller buildings at some point in the future. So if the board agrees that 440,000 square foot is an okay number, what we'd like as a staff is to have a cap imposed on the property that can be enforced into the future, or at least be reviewed. And so whether it's 440, 220, 600, whatever the number is, we like just one number as opposed to 11 rick houses, because again, this gives them flexibility to do some combination if that's what they choose to do. And the early exhibit labeled those as 20s, and again, they probably should just be labeled as future rick houses. And the zoning ordinance says they can be up to 40,000, and that leaves it kind of looser where they could pick and choose as they build their product where they want those. The general locations help. The driveway cuts are helpful to know where we're at on the property. They do have that shall not exceed 7 stories, and we might have to fine tune that. The zoning ordinance says they can't be taller than 60-foot period. So the 7 stories may be different in rick house terminology, because technically what we're doing inside isn't like traditional stories, but if their desire was these be 70 or 80 foot in height, the zoning ordinance is capping those at 60. So that's in the law anyhow. So we may have to figure out if that sentence applies or not, actually. Number 5 just says they're not going to put any big signs on the property, just more directional or small signage in nature. 6 says any utilities shall be located underground. 7 deals with access points. They show 1 on Lebanon and 3 on Ullum Springs, and they outline those on number 7. And again, it ties in with their exhibit. 8 says the applicant agrees that any egress off Highway 34 shall be paved, asphalt, or concrete, and shall meet any state specs for entrances. And 9 deals with the mowing maintenance provision that they've been doing along the property today. The next few pages of staff report are those same exhibits we've been looking at. And then 9, I usually don't spend much time on page 9, but since we have some new board members, we'll just walk through a few items here. The top of page 9 is our review criteria and findings required, and this is right out of the zoning ordinance. And this is what you guys have to do are supposed to do in reviewing a case, and right below that are the findings required on a conditional use permit. And it says here, the Board of Adjustments shall approve an application for a conditional use permit if and only if the applicant has demonstrated that the proposed use and an associated development, again, is reviewed under these standards. And so again, the big one is probably number C, that it's compatible with existing uses adjacent near the property. E deals with adversely affecting the neighborhood in which it's proposed. The rest of them are more kind of technical in nature on infrastructure. The findings, though, are important because you have to use those in your motion, up or down. And the Board of Adjustments, and it says shall make the following findings prior to the approval. And you have to find that the use is not detrimental to the public health, safety, or welfare in the zone which is proposed. The use will not contribute to an overburdening of municipal services. C, the use will not result in increased traffic congestion, additional parking problems, substantial increase in population density, environmental problems, or constitute a nuisance. And that D, the use otherwise meets the requirements of this ordinance. So I point those out simply because as you guys review a case, you're bound by the review criteria and you're bound to make findings of that nature. And as you, and I'm skipping a section, but on page 11, we have a canned motion that our attorney will help you with if you get to a point to vote up or down. And there is a motion up or down that has some of that language worded in there. But way hearings can evolve. There may be another fact that comes in or a different finding you all want to make that then would be adjusted on the motion page, and our attorney, Henry Smith, will help you guys with the motion when we get there. Last item that I'm going to point out is at the bottom of page 9, a staff item of concern. One issue that did come up on this site, when I got the site plan here that you see, I had a question about, I had heard the applicant had reached out to the county about making some kind of improvement at the intersection for truck traffic or back and forth flow from site to site. And as, again, what you can see is a proposed entrance lined up with one of their entrances for what I'll call kind of probably the first phase of the Rick House development, where there's a couple here, and then a couple future access points to serve other Rick House development, probably some well into the future. But these access points around Ullum Springs were discussed with the county, briefly discussed, probably not in specific about where they were, but what was discussed with the county that operational, they'd be moving from this part of the property over to this part of the property, coming in on Ullum Springs, and how would we kind of navigate this corner. There was some discussion about improving that corner that the applicant discussed with the county, far enough to the point where the county attorney was preparing, I guess, a deed to convey some right-of-way so some improvements could be made. I guess that has changed since the application was filed, and we'll let the applicant address what happened with them in the county on that improvement. But what the applicant has conveyed to me is that they no longer intend to make such an improvement. Their desire is to keep the driveways as aligned, maybe use a different style of vehicle navigating from site to site. But as a staff, we still had a concern, and what we put on bottom of page 9 is just more a suggestion. We suggested a condition that the applicant agreed to, and they, again, preferred not to agree to it. And we put that the staff has suggested the applicant agree that the property have no new developed access points onto Ullum Springs until that intersection widening and shoulder improvements are made. And we kind of loosened it up and said either by the transportation cabinet, the fiscal court, and or the property owner. So the staff's kind of concern was, we have no problem showing all this, but we'd like the applicant to, someone to sort of say, look, before we kind of move into phase whatever, 2, 3, 4, that we use this part of the property, but before we get down the road using these other driveways, that we agree to make some improvement here unless the county's willing to kind of revise that and say we no longer want it. But I did talk to Dwayne Campbell this morning and just to verify, and what he said was basically this was going to just kind of be improved to make a better turning radius, maybe even some gravel so they could come out, but the state kind of nixed part of that on their end. So that's what probably complicated this too. The state of Kentucky is not going to allow them to, in a sense, kind of widen the shoulder over there as a kind of a merge lane. The state didn't, and I might be speaking out of turn, but that's what Dwayne indicated, but the state wasn't crazy about the improvement. And what the county told me today, what they really like is if we could improve the shoulders, and part of this was going to widen the pavement here too, so we could just have a better radius swinging bigger vehicles in and out. So our only concern is, you know, that maybe we make some kind of scaled condition that, you know, before we get into these next phase of development, we either the state does it, the county does it, or some combination before we start to push new traffic onto Ullum Springs. Interesting enough, Ullum Springs, I'll go back to the picture, has good pavement width. It's a 20-foot wide road. It's a striped road. We got 2 good 10-foot driving lanes. It might drop down to 9 here and there, But as you can see, it's very little shoulders on the road. It's just an older road with some vertical hills. The zoning ordinance does say that we prefer these type of developments to be on at least an 18-foot wide road and have at least 3-foot shoulders. So I don't think it's really kind of out of line to ask for some kind of improvement, especially maybe down at that intersection. You know, down, it's pretty far off. You guys, if you went out there, what we're talking about is that intersection at the base of the hill down here. So that's the only staff item of concern. The rest of the conditions, I think, were pretty well stated, and we appreciate them being submitted. That's everything I have in the staff report. And again, I'll be glad to answer any questions you guys might have of me. I know the applicant's here and probably has a whole bunch more they can add about how all this operation works. I'm not an expert in distilled spirit storage or rickhouse construction, but they're here. And again, there may be some folks here that want to ask other questions or of the staff or the applicant or you guys. So again, I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Steve. So the applicant is here. It's Wilderness Trace Distillery. Do you guys have anything you'd like to address or put in? And before you start in this, a little housekeeping. Anyone who speaks, please state your name and address, and I'll ask that you're confirm that you swear your testimony today is the truth and accurate to the best of your knowledge.
We'll probably need them to come to the podium too
Okay.
to speak so we can get it on the video.
Yes, hello, my name is Shane Baker. I guess my work address is 4095 Lebanon Road here in Danville. And I would like to answer a whole plethora of things that was thrown on the table today.
And your testimony
So,
is the truth?
It absolutely would be.
To the best of your knowledge, correct?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
So I guess just kind of formally, I guess we could start off with just answering questions in terms of defending some of the points or explaining kind of some general idea. Obviously, you have an idea of what the distillery is here in Danville. We're very simply looking to continue operations of expanding that across the road of our property, joining it into, you know, likeness of the neighborhood, if you will. Our desire has always been to keep this property agricultural, which is why we went through this year-long process to get to this point, versus just very quickly turning it into industrial property. There's no better agricultural product to put on that property than whiskey. Whiskey is Kentucky's agricultural signature product. It starts with grains, it's made with grains, it's only added water, and then that component ages in the barrel. So by definition, including the barrel that stores it, 100% of the product we work with is agriculture. So one, we're trying to pay homage to that. Two, it's a beautiful piece of property that we wanted to secure as agricultural land. We also are farmers, so we have agricultural needs. We grow grains, we have cattle, we feed cattle. So our intent with this farm has always been a multi-use of agricultural grains, cattle, and then storage of agricultural products, which would be whiskey, on there, and that's been long debated in Kentucky's history. So we feel that we've worked with Kendall, who's done an exceptional job in terms of laying out the facility in terms of the allowed use, as well as all of our internal protected interest of our neighbors, of our water sources, of just our property. So if you know a little bit about us, you know that we're entirely about our environment and protecting that in our waterways and those type of things. So we have a very robust plan that basically solves all of those type of concerns, including any exorbitant, utilization of city facilities, which again is why we kind of went agricultural as opposed to industrial, because basically that particular site doesn't use any of the city's services. We don't require sewer there. We don't require trash pickup and roads and different things like that. Those are all basically, as you can see, constructed on the site. So those are some things, obviously, our goals to do. I guess I'll kind of start off, if I can, remembering all of the points to try to address. One would just start with the egress, about the widening of the intersection of Allen Springs Road. We thought that was a great idea from a county improvement project. We're there, so every day we see traffic coming up and down the road. And I don't know how many times over the years we've seen tractor and trailers who get jackknifed trying to go down that road. They're not trailers coming to us, they're just people who are lost, and maybe they missed American Greeting, or they missed, LCS Communications, and they're trying to turn around. And so we've seen that as an opportunity that could maybe improve that. We don't have a use application of sending semis down that road. So kind of coming back to Steve's point, it's kind of presumptuous to say, well, hey, you can't use that road. I can't drive a car on that road. I can't drive a regular vehicle on that road, just like the vehicles that are being driven on it, because that's the type of vehicles that we're talking about that we would utilize on that road. A flatbed truck, those type of things. So initially, if we had widened that, it could have opened it up to semi-access. But one thing we started thinking about is if we allow semis to turn onto that road, again, nothing to do with Wilderness Trail, where are they going to go? If they go all the way to the end of Allen Springs Road, they're in the same problem. They can't even get off the road. So we kind of seen that as more of a hindrance versus an improvement. It's inviting things to happen. And again, we didn't require it. We don't require it. We don't move our barrels today using semi-trucks. You may see semis on our property delivering barrels that goes to the distillery, not to our rick houses. So our use of Allen Springs Road as intended, we already have 3 existing entrances off that road. So it would be for agricultural use, farming purposes, as well as using our small vehicles, flatbed trucks, to transport barrels to that. So the widening of the intersection that we originally were working on to propose only was widening of the intersection. It had nothing to do with Allen Springs Road. So at that time, there was no problem having access points to the other rick houses as we were riding in the road. Well, as you can see, widening the road is at the intersection. It does not have any improvements within the rest of the road. So it wasn't a problem before, even when we were considering having semi-traffic go down through there, which we're not. So that would be one thing I would kind of point out there. It kind of makes no sense to me to say that we have to improve that road when I can turn down that road today, just like every other resident in the county. So that makes no sense, as well as existing things there, of which we would need access to because the property is divided off, fenced in, and we need different access points for agricultural purposes or that. So that would be one point I would like to make. Another point, I'm trying to think of some of the concerns that came up, and maybe you can repeat those, or?
I think just the one clarification, you had 20,000 square foot labeled on this.
Yes, I can explain that.
The intention is to have the option to go up to the 40, that's why we made it
Yep.
440,000.
Yep, I can explain that.
But the 7 stories was put in there.
Okay.
We have a 60-foot height requirement.
Yeah, we can explain that. So very simply, our layout is the 20,000 square foot, or actually it's under 20,000 square feet. We call them 20,000s. But that particular warehouses are, as you see, is laid out. There is an option for us to basically take 2 of those warehouses, if you will, and combine them into one. And when we were looking at that concept, very simply, it was when we were concerned with the setbacks that got kind of lined of saying, hey, here's 500 feet. Well, now all of a sudden you took a lot of my property away that I can do anything with. So when we were concerned about, for example, the 2 houses on the front, and you can pull up that little map, we thought we were going to be inside those zones. So we just simply said, hey, we can eliminate 200 feet of those 200 warehouses by doing what? Making one warehouse. And so that was the concept that we were after. If we needed to get away from our neighbors, if we needed to do more things to protect ourselves, we could simply combine those warehouses and build larger warehouses. And so again, that's not something that we're looking to do. It's not something we're planning to do. As you can see, this is the layout of what we're planning to do. We like to stay with the smaller warehouses for a lot of different reasons. So that was a concept that quickly went away after we were able to demonstrate, or Kendall was, that we were able to satisfy our goals with the plan. So we really don't have any need for that. On the conditional use that you sent us, it already had something 40,000 in there, and you just said, well, hey, just multiply it by rick house. So that's what I did. So I multiplied your report by 11 on there. When in reality, if we built large ones, it would not be 440,000 square feet. So that was kind of an overstatement in that report. On the 7-story, all of our rick houses now are either 5-story or 6-story. But again, what are stories? And so we didn't want to get into semantics because technically we have a dog house on the top of our rick houses, which is a 7th story. It's where the hoist is at. So I had this nice discussion with another county, and we were debating in terms of, what do you call this? Is this a floor? Well, technically there's no floors in those rick houses. Those are mezzanines. So that's not even a multi-story warehouse. It's considered a 1-story warehouse. So what's 7, what's 6, what's 5? I don't know. I just said, well, if we're going to get technical, we better include the doghouse. So that's why we included 7, because technically I can go up into that doghouse and, it's another space. So is that a story or what?
And you reviewed the text as it was being, we drafted this text, they reviewed it.
Yeah, it would still be under that 60-foot, those not a requirements. Yeah,
Still capped at 60.
absolutely.
If they work together, then the language.
Yeah, because currently we have 7 stories in 60-foot today, if you include the doghouse. But the other stories, they aren't stories because they're not floors. So it's semantics. How do we, share the same language with construction when we're not normal construction? So that was one point. What were some of the other? There were several things that we went through there. I know in terms of fire protection, we have since, in the middle of that, we've had the fire department come out and check the hydrants for the flow. So the flow on the property exceeds whatever requirements was called out in the CPU, or CUP rather. And we do have intentions, as we do on our current property, to extend hydrants and services out into that property. We want to protect our assets as well as we want to protect everything around us. I know there's always a concern about things we've heard in the state, and different things have happened with rick houses over the years. There's been rick house fires, there's been dumps into the Kentucky River and all these types of things. Those are rick houses over 100 years old. Our rick houses are less than 7 years old, and they're built under current state codes, which didn't exist during all of those other warehouses that we had issues with. So under state code today, there are sprinkler requirements if we hit that size. There are berm requirements, which means that we have to contain 100% of the contents of these buildings in our own containment basins, which we do. We also go above and beyond that with the state, and that if you look at our aerial, you'll see that we have a lot of ponds throughout where our rick houses are located at. That's not by nature, that's by design. That's what we call the dilution effect. If you put water on alcohol, you spread an alcohol fire. If you put alcohol into water, you put it out. So all of our basins overflow into ponds. And so basically, if there's anything that was not ever able to be contained, which I'd have to really challenge that because Kendall's good at what he does, then any of that overflow would go into our ponds and be diluted out. And none of that would ever, because of fusible links, there's valves that open and close in terms of discharge. There's no chance of alcohol getting into Clark's Run Creek or into our neighborhoods or anything like that. So we have a very robust, safe history within our industry, a very robust and safe design that meets and exceeds all state requirements. So those are some of the things that we'd like to mention. There is kind of phases to this particular property. I thought we updated our layout, but we're wanting to add a connector road basically between the top 2 rick houses and the bottom of the cluster of 5. And what that does, it just very simply allows us to come straight across and basically stay on our own property. We're building 99% of the roads that we need to access things for ourselves. And so what we're looking to do is just easy for us to roll out of that rick house around the dam of the lake there. So right there where so right there is where we're looking to add a connector road that basically for those cluster of 7 warehouses, we would never even get to Alum Springs Road. But at the same token, I also bring up to access off Alum Springs Road for multiple reasons. Emergency access. If I have someone who's injured on my property, I don't want one way in and one way out. I want to be able to get support to my employees the best they can. If, God forbid, there is an emergency of a fire or something, why would we try to limit our emergency services to one way in and one way out of a property that I can give you access over 117 acres driving through my own roads? So that just doesn't make any sense. When we approach this, we're very sound neighbors, very sound stewards in our neighborhood, and we trust Kendall. So If there's any questions, I'll answer those outside of that.
Are there any questions from the board?
I've got a question. I'd like to know how long you see it take before all of the utilization and storage on that site?
That is a good question. Currently, we are building about 2 rick houses a year. So if you plan that out, that's a 6 or 7 year project there. If we speed up, we may have to add an additional one into there, and it may slow that. If we slow down, it would be just the opposite. But right now, our forecast is 2 warehouses a year. And the ones directly across the road would be our immediate first 2.
Mr. Baker, question about, you talked about spill control structures and overflow ponds. Are they the same? Are they different? Could you give me some more detail on that?
Could you repeat the first part of that? I'm sorry.
You spoke of spill control structures and overflow ponds. Could you explain that some more?
Containment basins, so spill control are containment basins. So those are basically berms or just big holes in the ground that have been mined out. They have long ridges around it. So basically it's an empty pond in short sense. So as you dig it out, the volume of that would be equal to the volume of a warehouse. The discharge of that has a fusible link. So if it senses alcohol, it closes, so it contains everything inside of that. So those are containment basins, and those are a state requirement. You cannot build a rick house in Kentucky without that requirement. And then what we've done above and beyond that, very simply, opportunistically, of how we have to mine for clay in our property to build up the foundations of our rick houses, we end up digging some big holes in our property. So we strategically do that right adjacent to the warehouses so that they can become water basins, and so it can either aid in any fire fighting emergency, or by its own accord, it can extinguish a potential fire by adding flaming alcohol to water instead of the other way around. Because you can simply take alcohol and let's say 120 proof alcohol is burning, and I have to put 3 times the volume of water on that fire to extinguish it. If I have that alcohol going into a water, the volume of the water is already greater, so the fire is extinguished. So, and those are overflows from our containment. So unless the fire department is, filling our basins full of something, that's the only way it would spill. And so in our tactic, even through a state model, as you can probably have seen of every rick house that has ever been damaged in Kentucky, you're not going to salvage that. You have to contain it. What you have to save are the adjacent rick houses or the other things on your property. And so that's where our resources would be applied, and therefore the water that's going into those basins, from basically keeping those warehouses cool, has no impact on the basins of the other warehouses.
To be sure I understand, there is a containment structure which is a berm and is dry.
Correct. That is
And
correct.
it has a fusible link at the outlet, the engineered outlet.
That is correct.
Below that, there is a overflow structure, and that's where I'm confused. Will that be water holding? Is that a pond?
Yeah, as you can see on our layout, those which are showing water are those water basins. So
So the one.
yeah, well, we have 3 on the upper side. So there's one in front of the distillery.
Yeah,
there's
but
one
on this property, there's one
Yes,
pond.
yes, yeah. Well, the other ones, so the large pond in the front, and Kendall can back me up here, I believe under our current layout of that pond, it will hold the containment of one entire warehouse. If we improve the basin around the pond, we can increase that volume of storage into that. So that particular pond would have a fusible link on the backside of it. And then what you're not seeing on this layout, of course, is where have we mined or dug holes to build for the foundations of the property. So what that would ultimately be is around these rick houses, you're going to see more ponds showing up because we have to dig out for clay to build our foundation pads, just as we've done on the northern side of the property. So we have to create those. They're not shown on the map below because they don't exist yet. But those are always our intentions, because again, instead of just filling those back up, we leave them as additional security in terms of containment support.
I don't understand.
I don't know how else I can help you explain other than if I'm building these two rick houses, I have to dig a big hole.
The
to
spill
get-
control structures are dry berms.
They are dry berms, correct.
Each of those has an overflow to this existing pond?
No, that's not correct. What I'm saying is when we build containment berms, because they are adjacent to where we have mined dirt to build for a rick house, we typically end up with a pond basin that is additional spill containment as well as what we call dilution. So those are not required. Only thing required is the actual containment
Is the
basin.
dry berm?
But what we do is we kind of go above and beyond that, just because we're adding, again, we already have holes, so we just allow them to fill up naturally with water, and then therefore, if there is any overflow from a spillage, it goes into a water basin at that point.
Next question.
Yeah,
The sketch, and I can't tell you which one it is, it's the sketch that shows spill control structures for the 4 southern rick houses. It shows a spill control structure at the southern boundary, and there's multiple waterways. How are you going to get it to flow there? You're flowing uphill.
yeah. I'll let the experts answer that question.
So, my name's Kendall Wise, and I work for Vantage Engineering, and
Hey, Kendall, and you swear to tell the truth and everything factual to the best of your ability?
I do. That note that you see on Exhibit Sheet 1, Development Plan, it says spill control to be designed for 4 southern rick houses. So I'm just trying to give you a note, letting you know the designs haven't been finalized for those 4 most southern rick houses. Each one will have some form of spill control. As you can see, it's all, the drainage goes all around that floodplain. So we're going to have, probably each one will have its own spill control. And so, it's just a little different scenario than what we have on the north side, where
Okay.
you have those natural basins.
Each of them would have their own separate dry
Correct.
bermed spill control structure.
That's right.
Very good.
And we haven't gotten into the specifics of how those would be graded just yet.
Answered.
Kendall, are those requirements for the dry berms set out somewhere in the statutes or regs? Building codes, okay.
Right.
And just a quick question to Steve. Those would be a requirement of the site plan.
Correct. This site plan is a full set of engineered exhibits go before the planning commission. If they hit the threshold of 50,000 square foot, it's an industrial style development. Even though it's in the ag zone, this is industrial warehousing. If they hit a 50,000 threshold, let's say that second rick house would do it, they have to turn in a site plan for either just the one they're dealing with or the whole site, and that'd go in front of P&Z. That include a full drainage analysis, drainage report, several items they'd have to turn in with the site plan.
So in a nutshell, even if a conditional use is granted today, there's still surety by having a site plan that has to be approved, that all of that would be in
Yeah, all the
place.
specifics that Kendall just mentioned related to engineering, drainage would all be done at the site plan level, correct?
As well as it would have to have state approval.
Yeah, and the state would require that too, correct?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question. It's my understanding is that each one would have its own, but then when you say you're digging, there'd be like probably an extra pond for like an extra place. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, actually, each warehouse has to have its own containment or be a part of being to be contained. And the way our construction has been, all the warehouses have to be 200 feet apart from each other. So it pretty much lends that each warehouse has its own containment. With future exception of being the tube above that large pond there. So there's now actually a large basin that already exists that we could utilize.
Okay, and are there any questions from the audience? And kind of just how we'll run this is we'll take questions to the applicants, then we'll have opportunity for anyone in support of the project to speak. We'll have questions, then we'll have opportunity for anyone opposed. So if you fall into one of those categories, we'll hit you in a minute, but right now, are there any questions for the applicant? Any more from the board? So hearing none, is there anyone, thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Is there anyone present that wants to speak in favor of this project? Hearing none, anyone to speak opposed to? Okay. Or do you have anything else you want to add? I was going to give you a chance for rebuttal to any of the above, but,
Yeah, no, other than, you know, we, as we've always been, as we've, keeping up with these masks, as we've always been, you know, we try to be great corporate neighbors here in Danville and Boyle County. And by all means, if there are things that are concerning, our goal are to address those and to make sure they're not concerns. So we're all about education, and we're all about, you know, doing things above and beyond what we need to do, not only today, but for the future of our community. And so I know there's, again, just because of the nature of our business, there's concerns around that. But understand that we have addressed all those concerns internally and professionally, and we have our best interest of our community always first. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I should have jumped in earlier, but Mr. Baker, I'm looking how to resolve this issue of 60 feet versus 7 stories, and I think maybe the easiest way to reduce confusion would just be to strike that sentence. If this was put here to protect, we've already got that 60-foot building height to protect. If we could just strike that, if that's agreeable to you.
Yeah, that's not a problem. We were, I think, just trying to come up with a solution with Steve there. Yeah,
Sure.
that's not a problem for
Okay.
us.
okay. Are we all in, all done? And any comments from the board or further questions? Okay.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve as written.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. A motion and a second. Any discussion?
I would just ask the movement, Mr. Sutherland, if you're adopting the form motion in here?
As written on the motion page, with A through D.
Okay, and applicant's conditions, and may I request that modification of striking the 7 stories?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Does the motion need to be read?
No, with those amendments, we have our motion, which is the form motion with the applicant's conditions, striking language about 7 stories. If the second is okay with that amendment, then, okay.
All right, thanks for keeping it straight.
Yes,
So
indeed.
motion, second, discussion. And no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? And the motion carries unanimously. Okay, our second, thank you all.
Thank you.
Our second hearing reads BPW Properties has applied for a variance on a property containing 4.68 acres located at 157 South Danville Bypass, Danville, Kentucky. The property is zoned Highway Business, HB. Mr. Hunter?
Yep, we'll walk through this one. This one's a little unique. This is a variance on a freestanding sign that's out on the property. And as you heard, we had an application filed on August 25th. The property owner is BPW Properties. The applicant is actually kind of combination. It's Diesel Tech Truck Service, which is basically in the back part of this property. This is the building that we kind of, there's the zoning. We'll jump through some hoops here, but there's showing the zoning. It's got different addresses, just from 911, that shows 151, but 157 is what the PVA shows is the address of the property. This is a zoomed out view of the zoning. This is what we're looking at here, which is it looks like it's Napa on the front, but again, there's another tenant in the back of the building, and this is the property. I think there's maybe one more slide. Yeah, we'll come back to here. So basically, what's happening here is the Napa sign's been there for a number of years. Napa's been there for a while. And the sign ordinance has evolved over the years, 2004, 2012, now 2020. And the sign ordinance has caps on how big, how tall. And what started with this was the sign company came in to inquire about putting a sign below the Napa sign for Diesel Tech, which is around back. The sign that was being proposed was over the cap on the square footage we allow on the pole sign. So the applicant's got a couple choices at that point to either figure out how to make all the sign face work under the standards or to apply for a dimensional variance, which they have done here in front of you guys. So I'll read through the staff report again, way quicker than the last one, and just point out some stuff that you guys might want to consider. Again, on page 1, the description of the request. The applicants are requesting actually 2 variances. The first one is a 1-foot variance. The sign caps are 24 feet. The sign company indicated this sign's actually 25 feet in height. And as you can see, there's an open sign that's up on the top and has been there. So this sign's 25 feet. So while they were getting the variance request for the face, we suggested you might as well go ahead and apply for the other variance. There's no charge, it's one application, but there's no point to go forward and not get the 1-foot variance for the sign height to bring it all into compliance if the other one is successful. So they're asking for a 1-foot variance on the height to make it 25 feet. And again, that's already existing, so nothing new would be happening. It just brings that one into compliance. The main part of the variance is a 76 square foot variance from the maximum 128 we require, which puts it around 204 square feet to put the new sign below that, which is there's the Diesel Tech sign. It's blown up there, but the proposal, and there's the zoning ordinance standards, so we're zoned highway business. You get one sign, 128 square feet, 24 height. That deals with wall signs. So I think that's all I've got, and I'll go back to that exhibit. And again, the Diesel Tech proposal is just to go below that, 72 square feet or better. But again, that exceeds the 128. So they need the variance. Part of your zoning ordinance reference is on page 2 of your staff report. Shows the chart I just mentioned. The terms are on the next page. I won't go through what a sign is or sign area or sign face, but if any of y'all have questions about how we calculate sign face or sign height, I'll be glad to go through that. Those are just the technical terms we're looking at. The next page shows the Napa sign and the Diesel Tech proposal that would go below the Napa sign. And then again, the next page deals with review criteria, conditions, and findings. A variance is different than a conditional use permit. It has different review criteria and different findings. Bottom line, variances are supposed to be granted because there's a hardship or something that is on the property, why we need to vary the standard. What the zoning ordinance says, as well as the statute, we can't just circumvent the ordinance. We just can't grant variances just because someone wants for example, a bigger building or a bigger sign. There has to be some hardship or some other thing that the applicant needs to sort of explain to us why they need to go beyond the standard that we currently have in the zoning ordinance. All that's kind of laid out there on that page. There were no real staff items of concern. It's really your all's call if you think the variance is appropriate. The only thing I would point out is the sign ordinance went through a pretty long, with the zoning ordinance, kind of drawn out debate to get in compliance with the Supreme Court directive. All the numbers changed. We increased the face. We changed some heights. We made a lot of changes to simplify the sign ordinance. And in our opinion, this is a pretty big variance request, but there's some justification I think the applicants can explain to you guys. The only thing that we'd be concerned as a staff, and I really didn't word it, is the other businesses in town, if this one's granted, try to play off of this and say we want to have a bigger sign too. I think every sign variance you guys look at has to be looked at on its merits, and whether or not it meets the findings or the review criteria. There's some justification I think the applicants will probably point out, but I think there's some neighbors too that maybe are here that have a different view on putting that much sign face in this general location on the bypass. So again, the Napa sign's been there. It uses up most of the allowable face. Other shopping centers maybe have done this by way of trying to figure out how everyone can share the size, but then that would mean a brand-new sign. A whole new sign has to be constructed as opposed to just bolting a new panel on under the Napa sign. But bottom line is they're proposing 204 square feet of face, 25 foot high, and our ordinance allows 24 feet in height and 128 square feet in face. That prior to January was just 100, so we increased it by 28% with the sign rewrite. And now we got a variance in here to go, in a sense, double what the old ordinance was, or a 60% increase under the current ordinance. And again, I think some of the justification applicants will probably spell out for you guys on the uniqueness of the site and why they think they need to have that face out there in front of the Napa, or under the Napa sign. I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have. Again, there's a cookie cutter motion, up or down, that our attorney will help with if you guys get to that point on this variance request. And I believe there's folks here for the property and maybe some neighbors too here that would like to speak on this variance request.
I have one question.
Sure.
As far as that sign, that, well, they want to add that sign, is that going to add it to that pole, or will there be an added post to hold it?
It would be below that. The plan is to add a panel below the Napa sign. Approximately, I'm speaking, I think it's going to be about the same. It's a 6 by 12, correct?
Yes, it's nowhere near the same size as the Napa.
Right,
Oh,
but
The
it
Napa's are actually already over.
is already over.
It's 131.5 square feet already compared to 128.
So it's going to be the same width as that?
No.
Oh, it'd be narrower, but it's 6 by 12, basically.
It's a 6 by 12.
Okay, yeah, it's a 6 by 12 panel that would go below that sign on the same pole.
The Napa sign is 20 foot, 1 1/4 inches by 6 1/2 feet.
My concern was just as far as the wind, you know, as far as having two signs on that one pole. I didn't know if that pole was going to be sturdy enough to hold both
Yeah,
the
I don't know
signs.
much, the sign company that will, I'm sure, she was speaking here, but we'll let her probably get up here and explain the technical things. The sign that's being proposed obviously would have to meet the building code. We would issue a sign permit if this is granted for the expansion of the sign, but as far as the technical aspects of, it's a good question about sign structure and that, we really don't look at that. The sign companies are kind of bound by that with the client, and the building code kind of falls in there about weights and winds and those type of things. And they can describe exactly what that diesel tech sign is gonna be. I'm not even real sure the material or the mounting application that they're gonna use at this point.
So, Steve, the allowed is 128 square foot.
100, and that's each side, so we call it per face, so each side of that sign, the maximum face can be 128. It can be one panel or 10 panels like a shopping center, but that's the cap the zoning ordinance allows, 128.
And as it exists today is 131.5 square foot.
And with the new sign would be approximately 204, rounding up. They'd probably round down, but 203.5 or whatever it was,
Okay.
right in that range, 203, 204.
Thank you.
So let me ask you a question. You had a second poll. Does that seem to be applicable?
Unfortunately, the zoning ordinance only allows one sign per platted lot. So you only get one sign per lot. You get the ability to do all kinds of wall signage. The uniqueness here is we got multiple buildings on this lot, and we got a lot of building square, and we got more tenants. So the way that happens, for example, in the shopping center up here, you know, we all share the same pole. You get one sign per lot. That's the way it works. Unless you have sublots. The car dealers, one here and down the road, some of those are grandfathered in. We used to have frontage signs per franchise. So someone like the neighbor or Bob Allen, you might go down and see 4 or 5 signs. The old ordinance before the last one allowed car dealers to do multiple signs based on their frontage, just car dealers, or their franchise needs. But over time, it's gone to pretty much one sign per one platted lot, whether it be a restaurant, car dealer, whatever. But we got a lot of older signs around that were under the 2 prior sets of rules, so it's a little confusing. But today, you only get one pole sign per platted lot. If they were able to subdivide that somehow, you might be able to figure out a way to get 2 pole signs out there. Again, I believe the folks are here that are related to the property, probably give you better insight on the whole goal here, so.
And as before, if you all would state your name and address and swear to tell the truth and everything is factual to the best of your knowledge.
I'm Cassie Barker, and I do swear to state the truth as best of my knowledge. It's like I mentioned before, the Napa sign already exceeds the allotted square footage that you can have for a sign, so that doesn't give him, Mr. German, a chance to even have a sign. And the sign itself is actually, like you were asking, it's called what we call a wraparound cabinet. So it actually wrap around the pole, which that's will give it the wind structure and everything needed for stability. It's also a non-lighted sign, so there is no lighting. It's completely made out of a steel frame and an aluminum face. So it's very sturdy, and then just vinyl lettering. And we're just asking that we can just put it right underneath the pole, and it's quite a bit smaller than the sign that's existing. I mean, the sign that's existing is 20 feet long. This will be 12, and then, so that cuts out 4 feet on each side, and then the height is about the same height. I don't know if there's any other questions.
Okay, are there any questions for Cassie from the board?
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's been some discussion with NAPA about sharing the space existing?
There has not, just because we haven't worked with Napa directly. We've been working, and I pronounce his name wrong a second, but Mr. Gurman, for Diesel Tech. We do quite a bit of business with Diesel Tech. Since I've been at USA Signs, I have not spoken to Napa at all, but it doesn't mean that we haven't done business with them before. I just,
was wondering if the owner of Diesel Tech maybe had spoken with NAPA about.
I have talked with NAPA, and they don't have a problem putting another sign on the pole.
I'm asking about sharing the overall allowable square footage of signage.
I have not talked to NAPA about redoing their sign in conjunction with the Diesel Tech sign.
the hardest part about doing that is where it is a corporate company, they would have to go through a pretty drawn-out process in order to get stuff changed. I don't know if it's, usually corporate companies are like that. This one may be different and may be independently owned, I'm not sure, but usually still, just being under a corporate umbrella, they have to go by specific standards and codes, and it could take quite a while to get everything figured out and changed.
Could you guys, again, I mentioned that, could you guys explain, and you did for Lisa and I, kind of how you guys are on the property and what kind of brought all this up, is why all of a sudden today you guys decided to, I think you've been there a little while.
I have owned that property since, I think, 1999 or 2003, I'm not sure. And initially, everything was all one business. Today, I rent the front part to a Napa jobber, and I retain the building in the back to operate Diesel Tech. And what our problem is, if you do a Google search for Diesel Tech, and it shows it on a map, it says it's behind Big Lots. And people have trouble finding me because they don't see behind Big Lots today. And I don't know whether that's a problem anybody else has, but Google Maps, I'm kind of at their mercy today. I didn't fully understand all the sign ordinances, Steve, when I talked to the sign company about a sign, and I said, what can we do? And he said, well, we can put a sign out there. And I said, how big does it need to be? And he said, this is how big it needs to be. So I talked to the Napa, the man that rents the Napa business from me, and he said that'd be fine to put it there. And I didn't realize how complicated this was till I got this far, and I guess one question I had, if I made 2 lots out of it, would I not have a problem?
Yeah, if there was the ability to plat that into 2 somehow, and you have to get creative because we'd have to have some frontage, but yeah, if this lot could somehow be kind of chopped like an L, and we had 2 lots, then we could technically have 2 pole signs out there. But honestly, you know, trying to get both panels on one pole is probably more attractive and more efficient than trying to have 2 pole signs. You brought up a really interesting point, and I'll just point it out because I was talking about your address. You know, we got this address, and your address is 157, if I'm not
At
mistaken.
one time, there were 3
Three.
tenants there.
And what's very confusing, and I had to double check this, was it said your address is South Danville Bypass, yet you have Thoroughbred right here. So naturally, you would think your address was 150-something Thoroughbred, but actually your address is out on the bypass. And I Googled that, funny enough, and Google shows Thoroughbred, and it's all goofy, because it's pulling 151 Thoroughbred as Napa's address, and that's not their address either. So I didn't actually know this was about some functional addressing. I just thought maybe you guys weren't visible from the bypass and needed signage, but I understand your challenge with the addressing in Google, because for some reason you guys are addressed as the 911's got you as South Danville Bypass, even though we have Thoroughbred Drive, and it shows 151, 153, and you're 157.
Correct. There used to be a baseball academy
Yeah.
at 153.
And you search Google, and it doesn't even hardly find that correctly, yeah. It's a problem with suite numbers and all that, so we see that all the time around town. So,
And when I talked to the sign company, I said, they told me how much the sign was going to cost, and I said, well, how much would a smaller one cost? And he said, well, you can put up a smaller one, but nobody will be able to read it. So that's how we came up. That's how we came up with the number. I'll be glad to answer any questions, and I'm asking for some help here to let people find us. And we have put up a sign in the back that you can see a little bit if you're going north.
And relatively slow.
Yes.
Is there a possibility to use a monument sign?
Would,
Not be on the pole, look, you know, that's the latest kind of trend
Well, he can't have a second sign
at all.
on that frontage unless he subdivides it.
You know.
Only thing I could figure, and again, this gentleman spent some time in the sign company. I think I've talked to a few of y'all that maybe called me and had to just ask them about the case, because it's unique. I totally understand both sides of, you know, putting the face on that pole makes sense, the visibility, and maybe even some neighbor concerns. The disadvantage is we've already kind of heading towards the pole sign. What would have probably worked really great is we've got all this wall here, but it's really Napa's in that front suite. So again, it'd have to be something worked out, but we get a bunch of wall signage under the ordinance that's not really being utilized well. You know, you only get one pole sign so tall, so big, but we're really loose about wall signs, and it seems like it'd have been easy to probably put another panel, especially with the arrow or something, and been easier to do. But then again, it probably would have took a coordinated effort with Napa. If that's their suite, their logo, their colors, they might not have been interested in putting a panel, and then it probably would not have been visible as well from traffic moving.
To be visible, it needs to be out closer
Out on
to
the pole. And so
bypass.
we suggest at this point, if this is the sign they desired, they needed to ask for a variance. That's really the only option we had.
And the existing sign, it both exceeds the height and the square footage.
Currently, yeah, and it's just been grandfathered in.
I didn't know that till this
Yeah.
got started.
And I think there's some other folks.
okay. Are the,
To be clear, you own Diesel Tech and
No,
you
you
also
go.
own the building
Well,
that
he'll-
Napa is in right now?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's the reason I asked about making 2 properties out of it.
Don't leave. Hang on. Hello, I'm Patty Powell, Stir Powell Ford, 225 South Campbell Bypass. And if you Google, it'll come up right.
Yeah,
But Jerry, you need to get with your son, Logan, Mr. IT man, and he needs to do a Google citation on your business, and you can redirect the pinpoint in Google with the map so that it pinpoints that address and the street address for Diesel Tech, and it will show up in a Google search that way. So it's the citation.
Citation.
That's exactly right. So you get with Logan, because he's
Sure
Mr.
do.
IT man. I know that. And everything I'm gonna say is true. Okay? Even that. So, obviously,
I don't have to say everything through.
we know it is. We know it is. Signs have been a point of contention for many years with our family because of the manufacturers. And as Steve mentioned earlier, they require, if you're going to have a brand franchise, to have a sign, period. And I feel your pain on sign cost because Mazda made one little element change and wants to go more gray than blue. And they're right now wanting us to spend over $60,000 to just reface our sign, our pole sign, and our sign on our building. So it's a huge expense. It really is. And I have a hard time justifying it. I really do. But I'm going to stand here and say anybody that's running a business needs a sign, without a doubt. You've got to have a sign. I don't know how you've gone this long without a sign, Jerry, quite honestly. But you've been back there a long time, and you're back there, and you deserve a sign. So I'm not opposed to Diesel Tech having a sign whatsoever. I do have, obviously, some concern about keep changing ordinances and things that we've worked over the years to keep hopefully getting to something that's agreeable. And I think today, this is, here we are again with an example where it's hard to put everything in a square box and make it work, and where you've got multiple properties on, and if you can subdivide, I don't know of a directional sign, the monument sign. I'm surprised actually that Napa, and you alluded to this, would allow you to even put a sign up below there, quite honestly, because they're a corporation. And I bet if you went to corporate, they'd probably say, oh no, and by the way, you need to update your sign. and let me send you this sign survey, and it'll cost you $600, and then after that, they'll send you a $45,000 sign to put up. But I'm not trying to get you in that hole, believe me, don't call. But I would be surprised, really, if Napa would even allow it. Now, whether they come by and look at your property and evaluate things like we have inspections, I don't know, but if we got a light bulb out, they let us know. So, and we got to fix it, or we're not compliant. But again, I'm not opposed to Diesel Tech having a sign. I like the look of the sign. I think it's very attractive. I have no problem with that. I have no problem with it being the 25 feet rather than the 24. The open's already there. Not opposed to that. My only thinking is there a way to revise the Napa sign with the Diesel Tech together in a smaller footprint that would still be within reason of what we are currently under in our sign ordinance that we've worked, Steve and many before worked on to get to where it is today. I don't know. A directional sign, I don't know, that would help. A monument sign, but again, you've got to plat it accordingly to do that. When I look at the Napa sign, when you're coming from below, like behind Big Lots and towards our dealership, and I misunderstood, it is smaller than what I thought. It's going to be, I believe you said the same height, but not as wide. When you're at a lower elevation and you have 6 feet and 6 feet and you got 12 feet, that's billboard height, which is pretty darn big to not be on a highway. And so that is a concern of mine. But again, I'm not opposed to them having a sign. I'm not opposed to what the sign looks like, logo-wise and all, by any means. But I do have a little bit of a concern, quite honestly, to keep revising things if we can come up with another solution there might be another way to solve the problem. So that's my comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for Ms. Powell? One, I guess, just for me to make a comment for myself, I wonder, if this was passed as a variance, it could be with the condition that when and if the Napa sign is ever changed, or if another sign has put up, by another tenant to replace it, that it could be, would have to be right in compliance. So if Napa was to replace their sign, they couldn't replace it with a like sign, like size, they would have to scale down.
At least maybe get it in scale with the other sign.
Which would still be too big, but if there's an issue with the sign being able to be seen, from the bypass, it would almost need to be a little bit bigger. And I think one of the conditions that has to be met to pass this is that the applicant has to prove hardship. And I guess I kind of feel like not having a sign for your business is hardship.
I have some concern about binding the Napa tenant when they're not here as part of these proceedings. I think maybe a way around that is the fact that, Mr. Gurman, you own all of the properties you own.
Yes, sir.
That does give you some influence over, what your tenants are going to do and how they'll act going forward, what kind of signs they might be able to apply for. You would have to co-sign with them on any future applications for sign modifications.
Be happy to do that.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chairman, if you have a condition in mind, throw it out there and I'll try and give my reaction to it, and if there's anything that's legally concerning about it.
Okay, well, I guess my thought is, the whole thing that the applicant has to prove hardship, and I think it is, not to have a sign for your business.
Certainly.
Making, or, requiring Napa to change their sign, really, I see that as kind of hardship on them, like, now you have to do this to accommodate someone else. But in my mind, the solution is if and when they have to change their sign, or if there's a new tenant there that wants to put up a sign, it has to be, scaled in compliance. They can't put up a 20 by 6.5 foot sign.
What's interesting about that approach, I think, is typically if Napa decided to come in and just pop the panels out, put a new, they got a new corporate logo, we just consider that routine maintenance. And even if the sign didn't comply today, was way bigger, they can just put the new lenses in and it's good to go. If there's a way we can do that, to say if Napa's sign or either sign is ever replaced, or there's maintenance on it that changes, that the faces would be changed, then the square footage has to come into compliance. I guess it almost sets a second variance number in a sense. If they get 204 today, but if the signs are ever revised, they have to be no more than 160 square feet. I guess I'm wordsmithing here, but I could see if we're allowed to, in a sense, set two variance numbers, one for the future, one for what they're asking for today. I think that's something we could at least follow through on in the future. If Napa came in and said, yeah, we're gonna pop the panels, unfortunately, in your case, someone's got to scale their sign back because now we got a new cap.
I see what you're saying, and I guess there are kind of a couple ways to go at it. One is to say that just this sign face variance expires when the current signs are cycled out. And at that point, what they have to contend with is the current existing zoning ordinance standards.
Follow the rule.
If we wanted, we could also then do what you're suggesting, which is to set a second, slightly expanded sign face that would be then permitted. So either knock them back to 124 or whatever it is, or knock them
140
back to
or-
176.
Something.
It's the pleasure of the board. And I don't know if Mr. Gurman might have any input on what his request would be for the next sign that was to come in, but.
Would you repeat that, please?
What we're talking about is making the sign face that is allowed with today's variance, if it's approved, making that allowance expire whenever one of these signs is removed. So at that point, then the sign face would be reduced to a more compliant number.
Let's say worst case scenario, I hate to say this, let's say Napa decided to move, or you had a new tenant come in. At that point in time, then whoever that new top tenant is, or if Napa wanted to just replace their sign, they're gonna have to go with the smaller one. We would basically have a new cap if we ever change any of the signs out in the
Right.
future. Right now, the two signs you're proposing would be 204 square feet, 1/1. But if some point Diesel Tech said, you know what, Diesel Tech's gone and now a baseball academy's coming in, if there are any new faces are gonna be proposed, then we got a new number that we have to achieve overall on the sign, closer to the original number of 128, like 150 or 160 or something.
That would be fine. I guess one question I would have, that Napa sign is some kind of fabric.
Yeah, I know.
And it would be easy for a windstorm to blow that out of there.
And again, that's why we allow the routine maintenance, is if something happens, they can just put
Okay.
panels back
And
in.
put it back exactly, they'd have to put it
Well,
back
that's what
exactly
we're
like it
talking about,
is.
though. If they change it, we make it comply, so
But if
that's
it's
the-
just, if it's just replacing exactly like it is, they wouldn't have to
A
scale
lot
it.
of times people just replace them because they get faded, or there's a new tenant, and they just take the same box on that can. They just pop a lens in. But a lot of times they get damaged, and then we call that routine maintenance. You know, anytime you just gotta go fix the sign or replace the panels, we call that all that maintenance. We'd have to split kind of hairs on that a little bit to say, if the sign was damaged, they could keep the same face. But if it
Sure.
was ever changed out,
Well, if it wanted to be
repurposed-
an O'Reilly's, it would be a different issue.
Well, I'm not
Right.
gonna say that, I'll let you say.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, then they would have to use a smaller sign.
They would
maybe
have to
even-
be in compliance.
Yeah, be in compliance, or maybe at least just scale it with yours and be closer to compliance.
It's kind of acknowledging the grandfathered sign as it is, and that
Correct.
grandfathered status kind of lapses when that sign goes away.
That,
I think that's a creative
very
approach,
agreeable with
so.
me.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
Is there a number, is there an actual size that's too big, or maximum size the sign can be?
There is.
It's square feet.
For a freestanding sign is
What, the maximum?
Yeah.
128.
Okay, so my question would be this, just say somebody else did move into where Napa was. Why can't I have my sign that I'm put there, that maximum size?
Well, the problem is, we got one lot, you get one sign, and when you have multiple tenants, they share that face. So the landlord just figures this out. I'll give you an example, where Sears is over there on the bypass. Sears has the biggest wall sign, and there's a business next to it that's a little smaller. Well, when the last tenant came in, that was vacant for years. Sears had already used up most of the face on the pole and most of the wall, so the new tenant got no pole sign. That was a landlord kind of decision. Now, the one option is the landlord could say, well, because now we have 3 tenants instead of 2, we'll go ahead and just redo the whole thing. A lot of the signs are already planned with panels where we can just, as tenants move, we just move one in and out. But these franchise signs are tricky, because as you've heard, a lot of times they have to be exclusive, and they don't let other people be on the same sign, except maybe in a shopping center sign. So it is really tricky. Ms. Powell just made a really good point, that used to be Lowe's, and more than likely, Napa probably just went right back in that same panel that was there.
That's right.
Because that is a really big sign that was way,
That was the first
That's exactly right.
And, you know, a modern Napa typically doesn't have a sign that big either, you know.
I bet I can find signed
Yeah.
pictures from Dad's.
And that's what happens, is the lenses get replaced over the years, and then an older sign never comes in compliance with the rules. It's just grandfathered in.
I don't know what year it is, but it's actually in one of them high school, I love that, books that they got there, classes. I can't remember which one, I think it was like 78, 76.
I think this is a reasonable option.
Well, in '82 is when we built our first building on the bypass, and Lowe's came right after that, so it was in the early '80s.
83, I think.
Well, the only thing I was gonna add, the challenge though is he has 3 technically suites. So I guess, do you think you might get a third tenant though? Because I'm seeing this thing just evolving.
Yeah.
Your property's so unique with the way it's laid out with these, you've got 3, you technically have a third tenant, is that correct?
May not have any anymore. I don't know.
Yeah, I understand. Well, that would be the plan down the road, is you as the owners.
It's
you
very
could-
logical to have 2 tenants on this property with 2 separate buildings.
I see,
That's much more probable than 3.
I see. Okay, sorry.
Oh, you're fine. I was also gonna say, the UPS store that I came in and got permits for. There, and you could do this too on your renting contracts, they actually have their own signage, like layout rules, that it can't be over 30 inches. And that does help in renters not wanting to go over. So even if you wrote that in,
Well, I can enforce that.
yeah,
Sure.
that would be a good way to go as well.
And unfortunately, like I mentioned, the sign ordinance got a little looser with the rewrite. We bumped up the face because clearly the 100 square foot was not working for bigger shopping centers. That's not enough, actually. The height's got a little lower as a compromise, but we loosened up the way wall signage is done. You get 10% of a facade. It used to be you have to pick one wall, you maybe get a second one. In these strip centers with multiple tenants, it's just a nightmare trying to figure out who gets what sign face. Now it's just you get 10% of a facade. So the way we measure that, we just measure the building, and you get 10%. There's a lot of unused space on a building of that nature for wall signage, which could be for a tenant. And the strip centers kind of do it right with the logos, but this is a situation where we got a giant pole sign and a wall sign. I'm not sure the wall sign is very effective, as small as it is, but we got a heck of a footprint here that could, if it could be worked out, where we could have another sign for that back tenant. You know, a big sign, in fact, probably bigger than the one that's going on the pole, interesting enough, but
The only problem with that is when you're driving on any road,
You can't
anything,
see
you
that.
can't see it.
I know. The way this one has the bank, I understand. Yeah, you can do both, yeah. You can do 10% wall and up to the maximum on the face. And most do just that. So if our attorney put that together, I think that's an interesting option to kind of have a second standard at some future redevelopment point of the sign. Does that work for you, or?
I've got draft language, what remains to be decided is what that second number is gonna be. Will it be what's in the zoning ordinance, or will we allow some other number? It's the pleasure of the board and perhaps input from the landowner.
May I ask, will Napa retain their grandfather status on that sign? Or
I think,
should
I
they
think
therefore
for, I think for
replace it?
maintenance issues related to weather, storm, something of that nature, again, if the sign gets blown out by a wind gust, we'd let them replace it. But if they came in and said, we want to change the panels out, because Napa now has a new color scheme, we're coming into compliance.
Right. That's, yeah.
I think that's the compromise. But we would have to let them, if it gets damaged, to replace it. That's no fault of their. I guess using our Article 6 terms of involuntary maintenance, involuntary maintenance, involuntary nonconformity would be related to wind, storm. If it's damaged involuntarily versus voluntarily wants to be changed, that would be the split.
Did you have something?
I'm waiting exactly how Henry words this.
Okay.
Okay, well, if there was a motion to approve, I think we would acknowledge that the existing grandfathered sign was installed at the demands of a corporate tenant, and it occupied the maximum sign face area allowed for the entire multi-tenant site, which constitutes a hardship. Find that this sign will comply with the required findings for a variance as set out in the canned motion. And then here's the addition. That this variance applies to the existing sign plus the proposed sign, but the variance lapses with the replacement of either of these signs beyond routine maintenance. When either of these two signs at issue is replaced, the maximum total sign face area at that time shall be either the number that's in the development standards in the zoning ordinance or a number as decided upon by this board.
I suggest 128,
Okay,
the zoning ordinance.
okay. The maximum
Get back
area
in
shall be
compliance.
such as proposed in the zoning ordinance design standards.
Good, Jerry?
Yes, sir. Yes, I think that's very fair. And I, as a point of order, I'm gonna put a smaller diesel tech sign up because of how things may be in the future.
Do you want to do the
I
5 by
wanna
10?
do the 5 by 10 instead of the 6 by 12 after what I've heard here today.
Okay.
I was going to suggest that, actually.
Thanks
Just-
for that compromise, too.
Very good. That way, if something does happen to Napa, they'll have room for a sign there. If O'Reilly's coming, they can.
It's the chair.
Henry, question for Henry then. Even if you do set it up this way, the Napa sign still has grandfathered in. So if the other side changes, you still can't change the Napa sign, so you're right where we are now. Right, am I right?
Well, the way it sounds worded to me, that if
Sounds
either
like-
sign is repurposed or proposed to change,
It
Yeah,
we're
but
coming
you
in
can't
front.
change if it's a Napa sign, they're already grandfathered in, and you can make any rule you want, but they still have,
Well, yeah, today we're gonna allow the 204, but if tomorrow Napa came in and said, you know what, we wanna change it, make the logo bigger and take any change, we're coming into compliance with the rules. Then maintenance related to a act of weather or something.
yeah, but still, if they just want to keep preventive maintenance forever, it still puts the second client, the second sign, to be a particular, they're gonna have to get a variance.
That's correct, and that's something that the landlord will have to address.
Look at it
Right.
again.
Sure. You're gonna be back again, in other words. Sure. You know, I don't know if that's a good idea, but that's up to you all.
Maybe I'm a grandchildren.
Well, I
There
don't,
you go. Just put it on somebody else.
I don't know, and the reason I say that is starting to become, like you said, I'm not sure, does that even light up anymore, the Napa sign?
Honestly,
It does.
It has lights in it.
I don't know if it lights up.
Yeah, I don't think it lights up anymore. I think the sign's getting older, and now hearing this and this being the old Lowe's, there's gonna be a point in time that sign's gonna have to be repurposed. Either it's gonna fade, but I think it's not even, at some point, it's gonna need a new can up there, the electric codes change, and these old signs aren't repurposed as easily as you think anymore. And they know.
That's the reason I'm gonna make the other sign smaller.
Smaller, yeah. So it's likely that we're gonna hit that point at some point in the future. And Napa's gonna find that out, that, they're not gonna be able to just put another panel or, especially a new can up there. It'd probably have to come into compliance with lots of different
Well, now
code issues.
any changes that we go through now, we typically have to do a sign permit or something, whether it's changing faces, lighting, cabinet, whatever. I just did one in Georgetown just because I'm changing faces from Big K to Rural King. So, I mean, it's everything. Now you have to get approved. There you go.
I don't know if we had a motion. I think we were just wordsmithing a potential.
Are there any other questions or comments? All in, all done? As we say. Is there a motion to approve or, yes?
Make a motion to approve as Henry stated.
Okay. And is there a second?
Could you just reread that, just so there's clarity?
Okay. The motion text acknowledges that there's a hardship on the site because the existing grandfathered sign was installed at the demands of a corporate tenant and it occupied the entire maximum sign face area that's allowable for the site, which constitutes a hardship. Find that the applicant has met the required findings for a variance set out in the form motion. The variance to be granted applies to the existing sign on the site plus the proposed sign. The variance lapses with the replacement of either of these signs beyond just routine maintenance. When either of the two signs at issue is replaced, the maximum total sign face of the area shall revert to the zoning ordinance sign standards.
Verbatim, right? So there's a motion, a second, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed?
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, we've finished our two hearings. Thank everyone for attending. Is there any old business? Is there any new business? Just one quick announcement. Were there any announcements? I'd just like to thank whoever nominated me to be chair in the last meeting when I was absent. Thanks, Dan.
I actually have one announcement.
Okay.
I will be returning back to work next week, so I won't be able to come to the meeting if they're at these times. So told you I would let you know when that was gonna happen, so I won't be getting off till like 3:30, so. I probably after 4, probably, because I'll be working in Berea. So I'll be getting off at 3:30, so I'll probably make it about 4:30.
Quick, so when Ms. McGuire came on the board, and we're glad he's on here. Kick them out.
Would y'all mind?
Yeah, we have to go in. So, he inquired about the 1 o'clock start time, and I said, we've changed that over. Used to meet at 10. We've had a night meeting due to just the reality of getting the public in the room. 1 o'clock was changed to Wednesday, but it's up to you guys to set the time and place. He asked to be working at some point and wouldn't be able to attend the 1 o'clock meetings in the future. I said it's wide open to you guys to set the time, whatever's convenient to the board. Historically, this has been a daytime board. Henry staff's Planning Commission and Jess McKay, I believe they meet in the evenings, don't they? To accommodate the public better. Probably tougher on the board. Staffs, we're indifferent. You guys just tell us what day and what time to show up, we'll be here. But I really think it's up to you all to decide the time and place under the bylaws that you guys want to meet.
I'm flexible.
I got no problem with moving the evening, but it has to be on Wednesday.
That's fine. You guys-
It's your experience, Steve, that the evening is more convenient for the community?
Oh, for sure. Some of you guys, well, you were on the board, we had a fairly big hearing not long ago, and the public was clear that, hey, we can't get there at 10 o'clock in the morning. And the chair actually tabled it and reconvened it. I think we did a 6 o'clock start, and we had the room packed. I think you were here then. I think you were here, Jesse. Mike, you were here. Yeah, we met at 6, and there were folks in the room, and they had stuff to say. So I think, in my experience, I had worked in a different community. We had start times of 6, and one board did 7. It really doesn't matter to the staff. It's whatever you guys want to do.
That time will work with me if it works for you all, and I appreciate you making that adjustment. But then again, on the other thing, you said you couldn't do it on Wednesdays?
We could go to Thursday. We could go to, the city commission meets on Monday nights. Other than that, I think most nights, there's not a lot of meetings in City Hall. So if you did a 4, 5, or 6 o'clock start time, I think any day of the week works.
Okay, well, I could meet any day of the week will work. Besides, Wednesday was the only day that would work because unfortunately I'm a basketball official too, and Wednesdays are my only nights off. So there's no game, but that doesn't start till like December. you know, so that's the only problem that I have. But if we could just do it any other day on 6 o'clock, any day is fine with y'all, it's fine with me, and I'll work it out that day. So if y'all want to do it like on Monday or Tuesday or Thursday or Friday, whatever, that's fine with me. But, you know, come December, I know I'll have a game that day, and hopefully we won't have a meeting. Well, I have to be there. It depends on where it's at. You know, the game starts at 7:30. I have to be there an hour before the game, and I can be anywhere from Boyle County to McQuarrie County.
We're good with whatever. I think any night's open except for Monday. City
And
Commission's in here at
that's Chief
5:30.
Gray's. That's Chief Gray's decision. He's our signing secretary.
You say you get off at 3:30.
Yes.
Could you make a 5?
Oh yes, I can make it. I can make it anytime. I can come straight from Berea to Danville, which I was able to do it anyway. But
Change it to
5 o'clock
5
is fine.
on Thursday? I guess Wednesday is,
I could probably do 5, as long as I'm at church, 7, 6.
yeah, as you guys know, a lot of months we'll cancel. The new members, we'll send cancellations. We don't get cases. We've had cases now back to back, and some big ones here, but
4 push you on?
4 push me. But
what if we
4:30,
went to Thursday at 5?
4:30, 4:45. I mean, those are.
Get it off Wednesday, basically have another.
Do Thursday at 5, and again,
That's fine.
likelihood we might not have a case for 2 months, but, you know, we could change that. I'll have to check the bylaws and see how I think we worded it that they just set the time and place.
Right.
Normally, we bring you an annual schedule around November for next year, but you guys I think you can change the time and place at any given time. We just have to amend the schedule for the rest of the year, which is no big problem. And we're getting ready to bring you a new schedule in the fall for next year. Anyhow,
I appreciate it. But
We made a special exception to being on this time, this date and this time on Wednesday at
well, he's saying,
1 o'clock for the individual who is no longer with us.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, it was within 2 months after we
that's true.
he left.
Yeah.
So I think it's feasible to look at what's practical for everyone here and make accommodations as we need to and solidify.
Yeah, that's right. That's why we changed it. That's correct. Yeah, that works. Whatever you guys want. I think we're open to that.
Are we talking about the third Thursday?
Third Thursday at 5?
Okay.
Is that your meeting?
Yes, it
And
is. It
you're-
is third Thursday at 7, which on a lot of days will not be an issue, but,
Well,
yeah.
now we're making it real complicated. Would Tuesday work at 5?
Does it have to be the third week?
Well, we got planning commission on the 4th,
Okay.
and we got historic on, we got different meetings on different,
Okay.
we're the third week, and we used to be Thursday, and we went to Wednesday, as you mentioned, at 1, but we used to be Thursday, for some reason, that was our day, but the 4th week's P and Z on a,
whatever day we decide on. When I leave here, I'll go straight down there and talk to my signing secretary and see if he can have me close here that day. So,
Tuesday would work at 5, if that's good with all the rest of the board members.
it's fine.
Yeah.
5 o'clock's fine with me any day.
I like the later time, honestly. We haven't had a big meeting, but I think this is a better thing for the public in the future. When we have a controversial case, this was a pretty easy day, really. But- And we can always have special called meetings and down the road if there's something that you guys need, something unique, we can always change times and dates as a special called meeting anytime.
Tuesday at 5?
Can they make a motion and just change it, or does it need to be on the
I
agenda?
believe so. No, I think it's,
They can. It says that it can be amended from time to time as necessary to accomplish business. So,
yeah.
you can change it, yeah. We haven't sent out any notice for the next meeting, so
Yeah,
no harm done.
yeah.
So I make a motion, the third Tuesday of each month at 5 o'clock at the City Hall.
We do actually have the next meeting set for October 21st.
We'll adjust it, it's no problem, we still got time. Yeah, the filing deadline's not to the end of the month, we got extra Wednesday this month.
Okay, motion and a second. Any further discussion?
That's good.
Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? And the motion carries. Are there any other announcements? Is there a motion to adjourn? And the second?
Second.
All in favor?
Amen.
We stand adjourned, thank you.